Do you want to learn how to draw night scenes like these? Hi, my name is Oyun Orka, a VTuber who tries to draw, and for today, let's cover how you can quickly and easily draw night scenes. To start off, you can use any sort of deep blue color for your sky, or even go more purple depending on what sort of look you want to go for. Here, I'll go ahead and make 3 different examples of different sort of night sky ideas that you can do just to give some inspiration. You could go for a very dark blue teal color and then have a sort of gradient into a turquoise or slight greenish hue, and go ahead and add stars in a speck. You can also vary the color of the stars when you're drawing them, and something that I like to do when drawing stars is to use a mix of cyan blue, a deep dark blue, a more bright magenta, and also just regular white stars. And you can apply the same technique for a blue or even a purple gradient too. Of course, if you wanted, you could just keep your night sky more simple, but I'm sure that you didn't click on this video to learn how to add specks to a gradient. So let's go into how to add more depth to your star backgrounds in order to get that effect of a beautiful and full starry night sky. To start off, I'm going to go ahead and use this middle blue gradient that we used earlier as the primary reference for what sort of color we'll be using. When choosing colors for night skies, I typically like to vary the hue of this color wheel a little bit as I'm picking out colors for the gradient. For example, if this is our base color of this blue here, what I want to do is either vary the bottom or top gradient a little bit to the left or right, so it's either more cool or warm. Something that I could do is move it to the right a little bit so that the next color is a little bit cyan on the bottom, lighten this up a little bit and also maybe increase the saturation slightly, and then go ahead and add my gradient. I'm also going to go ahead and go back to this lightest value and then use a regular airbrush to sort of airbrush in more gradients. Now that we have our base for a night sky, what you can do here is, if you don't have a speckle brush in your program, you can just do this manually, where you go ahead and add in different dots over and over again. But ideally, if your program does allow for these sort of speckle brushes, it's really helpful to quickly use one of these to block in lots of stars. Here, I'm using my Oyun Stars brush, which is available on the Clip Studio Paint Assets store for download if you're interested. Now, going back to the technique that I mentioned earlier, what I'm going to do is vary the colors of the star as I'm drawing this. Because the brush that I'm using is pressure sensitive, so the lighter I press, the smaller the stars, and then the firmer I press, the larger the stars. I'm going to go ahead and first use very light presses to add in a lot of stars that are very faint and barely visible using this bright cyan color. I'm going to go ahead and also vary the star colors of this a little bit and just sort of move along this color wheel here, keeping the saturation relatively high and occasionally adjusting the value of this as well to be brighter. So now if you zoom into this, you'll see that because of the different colors that we used, it kind of gives this interesting depth effect as if you're looking at galaxies far away on your drawing. Finally, for the stars closest to us, while you could use different colors, I tend to like to use either cyan blue, a darker blue, or just white for the slightly larger star specks. Now when you zoom in, you'll see that we have different variations of sizes for our different stars in our night sky. Next, to add a sort of Milky Way galaxy effect that you see in a lot of star photography, there's 2 ways that you can do this. Firstly, the manual way that you can do this is use any sort of soft airbrush. Airbrush in generally where you want this galaxy to go, for example, let's say somewhere in the middle here. And then a technique that I personally like to use is to use any sort of cloud brush to sort of erase from this gradient that we just made. I'm going to go ahead and use my Hard Clouds 2 brush from my Nature Brush Pack, which I've also linked in the description. And while cloud brushes aren't exactly typically used for star scenes, because I sort of feel like when you look at the Milky Way galaxy, you're kind of looking at a river of stars, I just go ahead and use a cloud brush and then make sure to set it to transparent or erase and erase from this chunk. I'll go ahead and rotate my canvas as well just so I can get different angles on here too. Next, just to blur this a little bit more, you can use any sort of blur, blend, or fingertip brush. And then here I'll just go ahead and use the fingertip and then make this sort of shaking motion with my pen just to blend that a little bit further. Next, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my stars brush and then just add a lot more stars and press firmer for more specks along where this is forming. For this layer in specific, I'm going to go ahead and make sure both this gradient that we've created and the stars that we created are on separate layers. This is extremely important since we'll be applying different layer effects on this later. I'm not going to shy away from using a lot of specks here to represent a lot of stars here, just because I want to make sure that this is visually the most dense part of where the galaxy should be. So now that we've had our finished stars layer here, I'm going to go ahead and set this to glow dodge, and then also set the airbrush to above this glow dodge stars layer and set this to add glow. Next, I'm going to go ahead and lock transparent pixels on this and use a large airbrush to just brush in different colors for this too. Right now the base of this is this sort of dark blue, but I'm also going to go ahead and block in some warm colors just to add some more visual interest and contrast into this piece. And while you could stop here, we can further layer on this by making another layer using any sort of textured or clouds brush. And I'm going to go ahead and color pick this darkest value on the sky here and try to keep around this darker value here, and use the clouds brush once again to brush in a little bit more here. Use a mix of both color and erase, and also use a slightly warmer tone for this as well. And just play around with it until I think I'm happy with it. And finally, to wrap it up, for a little bit more detail, you can just use a very small thin brush and make small straight lines like these with your pen, just to give it that illusion of shooting stars in the night sky too. And if you add your foreground, in this case I'm just using my evergreens brush, but you can do any sort of foreground here as well, you'll pretty much have your finished night sky. Alternatively, if you have Clip Studio Paint and access to the asset store, the brush that I like using most for starry night skies is the Starry brush, and I've linked it in the description down below so you can download it if you don't already have it. If we go ahead and hide that Milky Way in a different folder and use this star brush, something that I like to do is sort of use this brush on where I want the Milky Way galaxy to go. Go ahead and set the blending mode to either color dodge, add glow, or anything else you like. And if you wanted, you could also make a new layer, clip that to the layer below with the stars, set this to hue or color or even overlay. And you can use an airbrush to sort of brush in different colors for the stars here. Next, I'm going to go ahead and use a mix of different texture brushes and then also cloud brushes, as well as regular airbrush for the main gradient here. So here you have two different ways that you can do night scenes in Clip Studio Paint without too much effort. And if you wanted to add a character to this, quickly add shading to your character and make it blend in better with the scene. There's two ways that you can do this. One is color pick a predominant color from the background, in this case this sort of bluish color here. Fill that entire layer, set that to multiply, and use a darker color for the shading if desired. Next, you can go ahead and on a new layer, clip that also to the character below. Pick a highlight color from the galaxy here, and sort of just use that to brush that in, just along the edges of the character, just to sort of define the silhouette. And optionally, you can use a sort of gradient or airbrush underneath the character layer, just to highlight the character a little bit more. Alternatively, if you want to go for the effect of sort of being lit up by a campfire at night in the forest underneath a bright starry sky, in a folder layer, clip that to the character base, set this folder layer to multiply, and then once again pick a predominant blue color from the background here, but this time on another layer in the same folder. You can use a bright orange color and just sort of block in where you want the sort of campfire glow to be. Next, you can erase from where you want there to be shadows. And optionally, once you have finished your sort of orange glow light layer, you can lock the transparency on this, and then further away from where the source is, make the orange a little bit darker, and then have it be a little bit brighter towards the bottom. Next, just to add a little bit of bounce light, on another layer separate from the multiply folder, you can go ahead and color pick a predominant color from the sky, and then just add in a little bit of light sort of on the planes where it's facing the top of the sky. So in this case, sort of the top of the head, along the collar of the jacket, this shoulder here and here, and then also kind of facing away from the camera or viewer too. I'll go ahead and set this to add and then lower the opacity of this, and then just refine the shape a little bit more. Next, just for some very final touches, I'm going to just go ahead and go back using my evergreens tree brush, sort of erase from this a little bit, slightly like this, and then use an airbrush to sort of give that effect of sort of there being a campfire and then the fire sort of lighting up the trees surrounding the character a little bit. And after adding some final finishing touches, filters, and effects, we're done. And that's how I personally draw outdoor night scenes like these. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, I would appreciate if you give this video a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from my channel. Also, if you'd like to see how I draw natural scenes in specific and learn more about how I use these brushes, check out the video linked on screen here. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!